get your mind around is organizing your work. And the first thing that I'm going to show you how to do that with is the editing template version 4.1 that I'm providing to you. It should be available as a zip file in the file section of Canvas. So I'm going to double click on it here and it's going to open it up. I would recommend always keeping the zip file stored somewhere handy because it's sort of the perfect template that you can always just open a new one with. So for example, let's say that you've double clicked on it and it's opened it up and created this folder structure inside of it. What we're going to do is we're going to rename this with the name of your project. So anytime you create a new template, you want to make sure that that template has the name of the project you're working on. So I'm going to call this Tim's Intro to Filmmaking Demo. All right. And this should work the same, by the way, on a Mac or a PC. It should still, everything in here should work the same. So normally what I would do is I would not have this zip file in this folder. I would move it back somewhere where it needs to be. But this would be my working folder now. So I'd want to make sure that this folder is where I want it to be. Like right now it's located in my demo folder. So as long as it's in like maybe your 2020 projects folder or something like that, wherever it makes sense, right? So here, I'm going to click on this drop-down triangle to open up and show you the contents. And really what this is just a way of you avoiding the problem of having your video files in one place, your audio files in another place, maybe music files you've downloaded or special sound effects files you've downloaded. What happens is that you start to have these files, maybe they're in your downloads folder, maybe they're in your documents folder, maybe some of them are on your external hard drive, and you have them in different places. And then this is really important for if you're on campus, you come to use the editing lab and you move from one computer to another computer, and all of a sudden the files don't come with you. And when you open your project up, it's like there are files that it can't connect to and it can't play back your video, and you're like, why is everything so hard in my life? Well, most likely it's because you weren't organized. And so this is a way to help you stay organized. So these folders all have a specific purpose, and you probably don't need to use most of them. You're probably only going to use a few of them. But I'm just going to go through the basics here. So the first one is the project files folder, and if you open that up, you'll see that it has an autosave folder. Premiere Pro basically auto-saves your file I think it defaults to every 15 or 20 minutes. You can change the destination for where it's putting those autosave files. You can also change how often it's auto-saving for you. And those will just all kind of go in here, and so you can kind of see it actually has some in here. I would probably want to just delete all these to start off with so there's nothing in there. The scratch folder is just sort of like a miscellaneous file folder for Premiere Pro to create its own sort of files when it's working on a project. And so if you look in Premiere Pro later, when I open it up, you'll see you can designate a scratch folder if you want. Now I have both a .prproj file and a .drp file. So if you're working in DaVinci Resolve, most likely that'll be something you do in editing class later next quarter. You would need this file, so you don't need it for this project. So I'm just going to delete it, and there we go. I've got my unnamed project file. Let's go ahead and rename this Tim's, and sometimes you can't have like apostrophes depending on the computer settings you have, so I'm just going to call it Tim's underscore intro underscore to filmmaking underscore demo underscore date, month, year. So let's see, it's September 21 right now. So I'm going to go 21. I'm going to click out of it here. 21/09/20. All right, day, month, year. Obviously, we're in the US and we do it the other way usually, but that's the way I've got it. You can change it to be whatever you want. And then old. Basically, anytime you duplicate your project file or save a new one off and you're no longer working with older material, you just throw it in the old folder. One of the tips with working with digital files is you never want to throw something away unless you're absolutely sure there's no chance you'll ever use it. Just because on the off chance that there's a file glitch, or maybe you lost some work and you need to get access to your old files because it would save you hours of work, you always want to have them somewhere. Old is a great kind of place to have that. Premiere Pro Autosave is a great backup, but the problem with Premiere Pro Autosave is I think that after a certain number of autosave files that it creates, it just starts to roll over, and so you can only go back so far. So with the Z-Old, it's sort of your own manual way of backing up your project files. So again, we'll get more into this later. Project file is a special file that basically contains all the work that you've done on the video. These folder structures really just represent containers for where you are placing contents, whether they're music, audio recordings of interviews or narration, or video footage you shot, B-roll footage, interview shot, whatever you've got, right? Graphical elements, pictures. There's places for all of them here, but they don't have any of the information about the ordering of them, the editing of them, how it's going to look and feel. That's all contained inside your project file. So your project file is all the work that you have done in post-production, and these folders are really here to contain all the work you've done during production. So I'm going to minimize that project files one, and let's go down to the next one, source. Source is really what stands for your main material that you're working with that was shot on a camera. But it could also be other sources as well. It could be like webcam captures if you're doing some sort of a COVID sort of recording where you can't be with somebody in person. And it's also the folder where sound is supposed to go if the sound is connected to the camera or follows the camera. So for example, maybe we sat down and did an interview with somebody, and we recorded the interview with the camera, and we recorded their sound on a separate audio recording device. So because every time we hit record on the camera, we also needed to hit record on the audio recorder, we're going to have separate files. We're going to have files over here for sound and files over here for video. And we're going to want them to both sort of live in the same place here so that we know where they are at. And these are separate from sound files down here because these ones are really connected in some way to what was shot with the camera. Proxies we will use later in editing class, but I think we can delete them for now. All right. Also, another thing you could do under source is you could, if this was a larger scale production, you would have underneath source, you would have folders for various scene numbers, or if it's a documentary, perhaps you would have different folders for like day 1, day 2. Inside of each one of those folders, you would have your own camera folder and sound scene folder. So, smaller project, we probably don't need that. The sound folder, ADR and VO, this is where you're actually going to put the first files that you're recording. This is where your interview is going to go. ADR and VO. If you wanted, you could actually duplicate this and make a new one and just call it like interview. And it's cleaner and clearer what that is. I guess it would be all caps if you wanted to follow the sort of way I've done things. But I didn't include an interview folder because I thought that ADR and voiceover VO was close enough and would make sense. All right. Later on, as you start working on your edit, you're going to find music files, whether those would be from stock music that you find online, or maybe friends, or whatever you find in your music that you're going to use in your pieces, in your editing projects. You're going to want to make sure to copy those files here, because this means that they're all now contained in one place, this folder. Everything in here is related to your project. So what's cool about this is when you take this to another computer and you open the project up, everything's there. It doesn't have to like look for it somewhere else, and you have to go tracking down all your missing files. All right. Sound effects, that's what the SFX folder is. Moving on, graphics. Do you have graphical elements that you created maybe in like another program like Photoshop or something? Letterbox Mats, I include a bunch of them here for you. These are basically widescreen mats you can put over your image to kind of scale, basically to change the aspect ratio of your film. So if you want a more widescreen look, sure, you can do that there. Premiere Pro assets, these are just various types of things that you're going to need for making graphics, shapes, whatever. Still images are in here, and then titles. If you built titles in a separate program, you can import them here, right? Or copy them here. VFX, this is just where if you have various background plates or special effects things you're doing with visual effects, they would go in this folder. Documents. This is where your script supervisor notes go. Your scripts, your shot lists, your storyboards, anything else miscellaneous related to documents for your production. Right? So what's cool is that now this not only becomes a post-production hub, but this is actually production and pre-production. All of your documents, everything can go in here. Be helpful. Finishing, basically when we wrap up the editing on a project, usually we send off a different cut, or we send off not necessarily what I call a cut, but we either send off a flattened video or a special project that's meant to be imported, like an XML, into something like DaVinci Resolve. Anyways, any sort of special exports, whether they're video files or whether they're project files related to color, would go in here. And the same thing for sound. As the sound would go to a dedicated like mixing area. They use usually different software for that. So they're going to need to get the sound out of your project and into something else. And so you need this place to store these files that come out of your project. They would go here. And then at the end, you get this final video file from the colorist, you get the final audio file from the audio mixers, and you combine them together. And they actually go here in the finished export folder when you're finally done. But also along the way, you're probably working on various drafts. Those go in the exports folder. Anything that you're exporting to give to somebody goes in the exports folder. And you can create subfolders here as well. You could have, folders related to motion graphics. Maybe you're working on some sort of a special effect that needs to be exported out and sent to After Effects. If you're doing a lot of this back and forth with people, you could create a separate folder under the exports folder that's just related to the motion graphics on that shot. So anyways, I think the whole point of this is for you to see that there is a place for everything. And if there isn't, you can create one. You kind of have a structure to work with.